I don't even want to start looking at the numbers because I already know what I'm looking at is not going to give tangible, useful information because it's inaccurate.
Welcome to the Happy Clients Podcast, brought to you by Dot and Company. Whether you're a virtual assistant, an agency owner, or a client-facing account manager, we all deal with clients. Lucky for you, client management is what we do best. Now, let's dig in, chat cam life, and have some fun along the way. Cheers to happy clients.
Remember when running an agency meant solving exciting problems, crafting killer strategies, and building meaningful relationships with clients? And now it feels like chasing emails, double-checking deadlines, and micromanaging the details. Let Copper CRM bring the spark back. Built for Google Workspace, Copper helps digital agencies automate follow-ups, manage leads effortlessly, and keep client conversations crystal clear without the overwhelm. Stay organized and win your time back and start loving your work again. Try it for free for 14 days at copper.com/happyclients and use Happy Clients for 15% off of an annual plan while limited time only. Brandon, thank you so much for coming on the Happy Clients podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Taylor.
Yeah. So welcome, Brandon. So Brandon is the owner of Aura. They are brilliant when it comes to all things financial and accounting. And him and I met and we had a great conversation about how agencies are growing and scaling and how much help agency owners need when it comes to really understanding their numbers and how important it is when it comes to scaling. So I invited Brandon on the show to share all of his knowledge. And our goal today is that you leave with something you can implement in your agency and get some quick wins or set yourself up for success long term. So, Brandon, maybe you could just fill our audience in on who is Aura and how you started and how you help agencies.
Yeah, well, thank you again. So I founded Aura about 8 years ago. And when we first started, we were fractional controllers and CFOs for all companies. And then started to realize that we needed to narrow down and professional services. And then ultimately, marketing agencies became our client focus. And what we really want to do is help agencies understand that by knowing their numbers and getting accurate information around those numbers, they can actually scale much more successfully. I find that a lot of agencies tend to focus on top line growth while not looking at their margins. And that becomes a very difficult hill to climb as you're looking to grow your agency to 1 million, 5, 10 million and beyond.
That's very relatable. I found the exact same thing within our business. I was kind of just looking at the top line, we're good. But when it came to scaling, it wasn't until I really understood what our margins were, what we could afford to pay for a new customer, what we could afford to pay employees, yada, 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 that we were able to scale because I knew my numbers. So I love this conversation.
Yes, and a lot of it actually comes down to there's when agencies are small, typically their bookkeeper has them doing what's called cash basis financials, where the a bookkeeper is looking in the bank statement or the credit cards, and when they see money coming in, they're coding it as revenue, and when money leaves, it's expense. The problem with that is that there's a lot of timing differences in an agency between when you actually earn the revenue you're receiving from your customer and when you're incurring those expenses, which a lot of times are your people costs or your staff. And so our job is to help align those revenues and expenses within the same periods of time, making it much easier to actually understand what profit are we generating and how do we more effectively scale based on the margins that we're generating.
That is key. And I think working with people who understand agencies is really key as well. Because I know for me, working with general accountants, they're great, but I have to kind of explain over and over again how our business works. So it's so much easier working with folks like you who already understand how our model works and can just kind of slide right into the business and make things happen. So that's super helpful.
Yes, thank you. There's, the biggest thing and, one thing that's really important in an agency is time tracking. Unfortunately, I see too many agencies that maybe they are doing their time tracking, maybe they're not, but then they're not incorporating that into their financial statements. And that's really the key. right, is understanding where are your people putting their time? Where are they working on billable versus non-billable work? And how do you then take that information, translate it into the financials to actually understand what capacity do we have as an agency? What is our utilization? What is the actual margin we're generating? And then how can we more effectively scale based on this very useful information that we're now looking at?
So to me, I'm a marketer, and that is very overwhelming. Like thinking about how do I track everyone's time? How do I put all this in? How do you work with someone like me who I just want to go out and grow my business so that I don't need to worry about those things?
The only thing that we, as the accountant, really do in the month end close are concerned with is getting the time tracking information. And what's really key there is getting your staff to understand, hey, this time tracking information is really important. We, as the business owner, are not trying to micromanage you or trying to nitpick every little bit of time, but we need to understand where you're putting your time and with what clients so that we can look and determine, are we actually making the right margin with these clients, or do we need to pursue other kinds of business? In the case of a lot of agencies that start to grow and turn full service, not only do you want to look at which client are you working on and for what duration is your staff working, but then what subset of services are they doing? Because with that information, we can then take it from there, right? We take that data, we export it, we do our little wizardry in Excel to determine, okay, we know people's burdened cost, and then we can allocate between how much time they're spending on respective clients. And then what we want to do in the financial statements is then align the revenues and expenses together so that we can actually see, okay, how much margin are we generating on these clients? And is this the right path forward? And if it's not, then we can actually see, and you have that hard data. It's no longer a gut decision on does this make sense or not. The data will actually help tell the story.
Yeah, that's so important. I think for most of us agency owners, and I'm speaking for all of us agency owners listening, a lot of us are kind of accidental business owners. We start in our agency because we're really good at maybe marketing or account management or sales, and then we have to run a business on the back end. It's like I don't know how to do all this fancy tracking stuff. Um, so, from your perspective, obviously you work with a lot of agency owners. What is kind of that number one financial blind spot that you see agency owners making time and time again?
Yeah, I think the thing I consistently see is this push to just, okay, if we're in a tough situation, let's just bring in that one big new client and that's going to help fix our problems without understanding, are we doing the right services for that client? Are we generating the right margin for that client? Without even understanding in our whole suite of services, where are we actually making money and where are we not making money? And so I think this desire to just grow top line revenue and to just say, okay, if we just bring in a little bit more business, that's going to solve the problem. I see time and time again that actually doesn't solve the problem. A lot of times it can exacerbate or make the problem even worse, right? So it's really about taking a step back before even taking on any new business and kind of looking holistically at the different service offerings and clients to say, well, where are we making money? Where can we actually scale this business up? And where should we be putting our efforts? And a lot of times that data that's already kind of available to you will help drive such better decision making in being able to determine what's the right kind of business that we can scale with that is easier to grow, that is less headache for us as the business owners. Because at the end of the day, when we're in service-based businesses like you and me, it becomes burdensome to have to hire, onboard, and train staff. So as we can look to bring on higher margin work, well, that's less effort that we have to put into that HR process of onboarding and all of the headaches that come along with that.
Totally, totally. So, when speaking with agency owners, where are you looking? What indicators show a healthy financial situation? Like, what are those KPIs or what are those flags that you're looking for?
So a lot of it starts with kind of understanding what is their business model and then be taking a quick look behind the scenes to see, are they doing things properly? And so a good example of this would be a project-based environment. So if you're a website development agency and you're doing large websites and you immediately get a 25% deposit from a client upon execution of your SOW, and that's immediately going to income, well, that's a red flag to me, because what that's telling me is that you're not getting accurate financial data, right? What you really should be doing is that deposit you receive is actually a liability to you. Until you actually perform services, I don't want to recognize any of that. So that should go right on the balance sheet. And so when I understand what the business model is, and then I take a look at the financials, what that allows me to do is then say, okay, well, is this being done accurately? And if it is being done accurately, okay, well, then I can feel a little more confident actually looking at the numbers. But a lot of times it's not done accurately. And so I don't even want to start looking at the numbers because I already know what I'm looking at is not going to give tangible, useful information because it's inaccurate. And so it really starts with understanding the importance of this good data. And if somebody isn't an accounting wizard, right? Many of us aren't, and that's okay. It's finding those subject matter experts that we can work with, to your point, that have that agency experience, who can help us understand, okay, how do we get to a level playing field of actually understanding where we are today? So that way we can understand where the potential problems might lie and where are the areas of opportunity.
So important. So when I'm thinking about this, a big part of what we help agency owners with is creating that freedom. Once you don't need to speak to your clients all day long every day, that's a sense of freedom. But to me, understanding your numbers and what's making you money, what's costing you money, where you're going, how you're going to scale, that to me is freedom. And that will allow you to sleep better at night and benefit everybody in the business. Um, so talk to me a little bit about how agency owners can create this freedom by really understanding their numbers or working with someone like you. And what does that do for businesses?
Great question. So I think a lot of people, they know they can look at expenses, they can see their actual costs. And one of the biggest costs that we as business owners have is opportunity costs. Okay. So I think a lot of agency owners either do one of two things. Either they maybe don't understand the financial data and then they kind of, look another way and pretend not to see it, or they really try to dig in and they're really trying to analyze what's going on within their agency. And the reality is that's a lot of time that you could be better spent doing something else. So if your passion is in the creative side of the agency, we'll put more focus into that. Or if it's maybe sales, right? Leave the subject matter experts to kind of focus on these things, because we're going to do a few things. First of all, we're going to give you back your time, right, to put that where you better serve it. But we're also going to do is look at, okay, where are the problems within the company, right? What I want to do is I want to help agency owners scale profitably. And what I unfortunately have seen is where they start off not profitable and then try to grow with that, and it creates a bigger and bigger headache. And so the freedom to say, this is what the numbers are, here are where we should be putting our efforts into the business. Not only is it going to give you a sense of where we need to maybe take this business or where we need to focus our areas of opportunity, but it's now going to free the business owner up to focus where they should be putting their efforts. And at the same time, by having a more profitable, healthy business, that now buys you back the opportunity to spend your time as you see fit. If you now are generating more profit within the business, you can bring in more of a leadership team to develop them, or even a CEO, right? But we can't do those things if the business is not generating the margins it should be.
Totally. Totally. I love this. So obviously, we're huge fans of outsourcing. We are an outsourced solution for agencies, and so are you. When does it make sense to bring in a outsourced controller, outsourced CFO, someone like you who are clearly experts in this area, A lot of the agency owners we work with maybe are starting out. They might be at that 500 million, 2 million mark. Um, when would you recommend agencies come to someone like you for support?
Great question. I would say that typically when an agency gets to around $1 million in revenue, at that point in time, cash-based accounting is not going to cut it moving forward. And so at that point, you really want to determine that accrual, which is what we specialize in, is really the path. Now, sometimes bookkeepers will offer these services. A lot of times, these are kind of a little bit above their heads from a sophistication standpoint. And so you really want to find that subject matter expert at this point moving forward, because when you're at 1 million in revenue looking to grow to 2, 3, 5, and beyond, now you need to actually start investing a lot of money back into the business. This is when you need to start developing a leadership team. This is when you need to start looking at important KPIs within the organization. This is when a lot of investments are going to be made. And in order to make those investments, you want to make sure that you're doing those off sound business decisions, off accurate data, right? And that's really what we drive to, is let's give you the accurate data in order to make those decisions, not from a gut, but from a place of empirical fact. And so I would say right around the million mark is when companies should be looking to outsource. And I do believe in outsourcing in our industry, and here's why. First of all, you don't need a full-time equivalent for a controller or a CFO. You would have to be a much, much, much larger organization. So then the other option is, well, okay, I could bring in a full-time employee, maybe somebody with a few years experience. There really is a pretty large knowledge gap between someone who has 2 to 3 years experience and a team like ours where we have people with 15, 20 plus years of experience. And so because you don't need that full-time individual, and because you really need subject matter experts, the fractional model makes a ton of sense in this industry. And that's why we're here to service agency clients.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I think honestly, you could go a really long time without hiring somebody full time in this role, like a really long time.
I've worked with clients upwards of $100 million in revenue that had fractionals, and it was still more than servicing their needs.
I bet.
And I think in these administrative roles, particularly around finance, as one example, you really want to evaluate, when do I need a full-time in-house person versus when can I look to the fractional? Because a lot of times you get a lot of value out of the fractional at a lower price point.
Totally. That makes complete sense. And if I hired a controller, I am not going to know how to teach them how to do what you're doing. So it just totally makes sense. Um,
Yeah, great point. Unfortunately, we're in a pretty unregulated industry. So anybody can call themselves anything. Bookkeepers can call themselves CFOs. I see it all the time. And unless you're very knowledgeable in accounting yourself as the business owner, you're not going to be able to truly know, is this person capable of doing the work, right? And so that's where I really would emphasize to look for somebody who has industry expertise, to your point, because there are so many different kinds of accounting. Construction accounting is very different than manufacturing accounting, than agency accounting. They all have their own nuances, and you really want to find someone who has intimate experience within the agency realm when you're exploring different options.
totally. And it's risky to not really. I see it as that. If I go out and hire someone without the deep understanding of my industry, I don't know how to check their work. That could be causing me so many headaches down the road. And I don't know about you guys, but I do not have the time or space to be fixing people's mistakes, especially when it comes to finance. Cool. Well, Brandon, I want to leave our listeners with kind of a tip they can use or something they can action within the next 90 days that will change the game for their agency. So, do you have one piece of financial advice you could leave us with?
So I would say that if you want to take the first step and you want to try to DIY it, it starts with the time tracking. And so what you want to do is you want to take that time tracking for a month. You want to understand, okay, is this accurate? Are people putting in all their time, regardless if they're doing billable or non-billable work, regardless if they're on vacation or have a sick day? You want to have a comfortable knowledge base of knowing that the data's in. And then you want to put that into Excel and you want to start to mess around with it. And you want to, at a high level, you can see, okay, I know that this employee worked this many hours on this client. You can then back in a little bit of, you can understand, okay, what is their burdened hourly rate? You can start to do some of that math and you can start to see there's a lot of valuable information in there to determine, okay, are we making the right kind of margins with our clients? Because even if the financial statements themselves are inaccurate, the time tracking is the place to start. And so I would say is start there, do a little bit of digging around, learn a little Excel. And if you're getting to that point and you're getting frustrated, I'd be happy to help you from there.
Awesome. And is there a tool that you recommend for time tracking?
There's clients that use Harvest. There's clients that use Clockify. Some people use QuickBooks. To me, it doesn't matter. What really, at the end of the day, what I want to see is I want to know when an employee or freelancer was working on a client, for how long, and doing what services. And if you can get that information, and if that information can be downloaded as a CSV file or Excel file, can pretty much take it from there, regardless of which system you're using.
Perfect. 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 We use Toggle, but
Oh,
there's a
great.
million different tools out there. Cool. Well, Brandon, this was great. Where can agencies learn more about Aura and get some help?
Well, you can check us out on our website, which is www.auracfo.com. And we've started to also put some content onto our Instagram page, which is at AuraCFO. So I would encourage agency owners to check us out and maybe give a follow. We're trying to drive a lot of valuable content because I think there's a lot of information out there that could be very valuable to giving agencies the understanding of how do I grow a successful, scalable, and most important, profitable business.
Definitely. Well, highly recommend you reach out to Brandon and get their help, especially as you're growing and scaling your business. It will 10x your growth by really deeply understanding your numbers and knowing where to scale, not just go scale. It's what services should you be scaling and growing. So, thanks so much, Brandon, for taking the time to come on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Cheers to happy clients.